Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the hot seat. This is the hot seat where we're going to be discussing interesting topics in as far as the geopolitical issues are concerned in the diaspora. I'm seated here with burgeoning scholar, the one and only Mahiri Balunywa, aka Commando. All of you remember him from our alma mater in Mui Primary School, aka Commando. And I'm impressed that aka Commando has changed his life from the man of the likes of Jackie Chan and Kung Fu to an academic giant of sorts in this country. So he has written a book together with one of the academic giants, Professor Yash Tandon. And this is the narrative of the book. The clash of Russia and Ukraine manifests not only a scaling global disorder in the short run, but a new conversation in the making of a new world order. This conversation rotates around the shift from a unipolar into a multipolar dispensation. It manifests the emergence of a new force on the scene of a decline of the United States in global geopolitics. The United States empire is in a state of a free fall, for whatever rises must automatically succumb to the gravitational law of capsize. Once the demand curve gets to the crescendo level, it conventionally dwindles into what economists define as the law of diminishing marginal utility. It is important for the United States to rationally negotiate its fall without affecting innocent Africa. This is a book that is written together with Yash Tandon. For the sake of our viewers, Professor Yash Tandon is captured in our book of Rebels of Jurisprudence under the title Legal Hall of Fame, Uganda's Legal Generals, where we discuss some of the people who we think have had a lot of impact, legal or otherwise, in as far as affecting the geopolitics perhaps of Uganda as an entity. And for those of you who will be lucky, you'll find this book very soon. It has names like Professor Kakoza, Professor Joe Oloka Onyango, Professor David J. Bachivinga, Professor W. Kanyehamba, Professor Sylvia Tamale, Professor Frederick Sempewa, Professor Ben Pinomugisha, Professor Ntambireki, Professor Mbazira, Professor Mamdun Mamdan, Professor Ali Mazurui, Professor Tibatemwa, Professor Yash Tandon, Professor Dan Wadada Nabudele, Professor Abraham Kiapi, Professor Omon Ojo, Professor John Jinbalia, Professor Rugumayo, Professor Juko, and many, many others. That is just a tip of what is going to be contained in this book. Yash Tandon, for those of you who do not know him, is a man of no small reputation. He is characterized as one of those who belongs to the Gang of Four. Dr. Mahiri explained to me a little bit about the Gang of Four.
Ah. Well, we must appreciate the fact that in post-colonial Uganda, we had four illuminating intellectuals who decided to leave the lecture theaters and went to the bush to fight the Amin regime. We had Professor Yash Tandon,
Yes.
Professor Omonyo Jok, Professor Rugumayo, and Professor Dan Nabdere.
Okay.
You know, these four guys came from different parts of the country. Like you've said, Nabdere came from the Bugisu sub-region. Yash Tandon comes from the Karamaja sub-region. Omonyo Jok comes from northern sub-region. Rugumayo comes from the western. These people transcended tribal ethnic and began looking at Uganda, and others have referred to them as the people who constructed the ideologue of the second liberation of Uganda.
Wonderful.
That's the little you know about them.
Okay, excellent. Now you have co-authored a book with Professor Yash Tandon, and your argument is that the war in Ukraine is a beginning of a third world war. I want to get it very clear. Dr. Mahiri, aka Commando.
No.
Tell us, is that a myth or a lie?
Well, we must appreciate, again, as I've said, that on the Feb of 2021, Russia invaded Ukraine. And when Russia invades Ukraine, the war begins. So originally, it was looked at as an interstate war, right? Then, with time, NATO comes in, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Yes.
Then, with time, we also see European Union coming in, being led by the USA. Now, the war shifted. It was no longer a war between Russia and Ukraine, but it now became a war between Russia, China on one side, USA, Britain, France, just as they were in the First and Second World War.
Okay.
So when we pick up the leaves of the First and Second World War, you'd realize that there are antidotes that points to the fact that that's where we are going. So we are not discussing, in this book we don't discuss the Third World War, but we discuss the concept of the Third World War evolving.
So you think that the war in Ukraine is perhaps a spark of what would intentionally turn into a third world war?
That is our argument. And of course, that argument is based on the thesis of the antithesis of the synthesis. Right? That the thesis is we look at Ukraine as the battleground for the beginning of the Third World War. You know, because we see NATO there, we see European Union there, we even now see neutral organizations like the United Nations Security Council, they are all there, right? And of course, we also know very well that Russia has also resolved itself into reviving what we call the Soviet Union, right? So when you look at these two aspects, you'd be tempted to believe with an increasing amount of confidence that indeed the Third World War has begun.
Okay.
Just as the First and Second World War began.
There are those who
they began from a very small country, Poland, right? And eventually they kept on growing, and eventually we saw the First and Second World War.
Okay.
We also saw the League of Nations. Just as you see, United Nations now joining. United Nations is no longer now acting as a neutral, independent body. It is now acting as a pro-West.
Okay.
We also see now China joining Russia, Belarus, and other countries.
North Korea, perhaps.
You've said it. So why don't you call it a Third World War? There are all reasons. The alliances, the world now is divided into.
So do you
saw when the United Nations Security Council, the United Nations General Assembly was called by its chair.
Yes.
You know, to vote against or 4, it was a resolution. Many countries decided to stay independent.
Yes.
In what came to be called the non-alignment movement. You know, the non-alignment movement was begun in 1947 by Jawaharlal Nehru, the Indian Prime Minister. And at that time when the world was divided between communism and socialism, you know, small independent states led by Jawaharlal Nehru, the Indian Prime Minister, decided to go non-aligned. He said, no, I don't belong to the West, neither do I belong to the East.
Okay, but now
we also see that happening.
Don't we see also...
We are actually seeing a recreation of capitalism versus communism.
Okay, that's the
Russia representing communism and America representing capitalism. So we are seeing a rebirth of all what happened in the First and Second World War into the Third World War.
Okay.
So that is the alarm that we are making.
Do you see particular countries as so determinants, or perhaps people who are likely to solve this puzzle? Do you see any absolute neutrality in this game?
Well, when you look at we have the likes of Turkey.
Yes.
You know, we have the likes of India. You know, we appreciate the fact that fine, India is part of the BRICS, right?
Yes.
We are seeing the emergence of the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And within that Brazil, within that BRICS establishment, we are seeing India trying to play a neutral role.
Yes.
And some of these countries have always said, no, we can negotiate, we can mediate. You know?
Yes.
So there are countries that seem to be playing a game of neutrality, you know, under the umbrella of what we came to be called the non-alignment movement. But the other question would be, how non-aligned are the aligned countries like India?
Good question.
When they are part of the BRICS.
Absolutely. The other question I would like to ask you is there a justification for what is happening in Ukraine? In your own position, you and Professor Yash Tandon, is there a justification? Or are you saying that this is simply a flimsy excuse for perhaps a change of power?
You know,
like you said, a change of the world order.
Yeah, you know, for quite long, we've been seeing the United States, you know, consolidating what we call the unipolar, you know, geopolitical framework.
Yes.
Where it is the hegemony, it determines what happens on the globe. It influences the social, political, and economic trends. You know, to the extent that it even suffocates emerging, developing countries. By the way, that is the reason as to why we now see the BRICS. You know, so I think the justification lies in one camp saying, no, we need to shift. We need to have a paradigm shift from the unipolar to the multipolar.
Could there be a reason why this is going that way? Because there are those who will argue and say, after the collapse of the, you know, the demise of the Cold War, remember?
Right, Soviet Union.
Yes, the demise of Soviet Union. There was an agreement
Yeah.
that, you know, NATO should end here and it should not go any further than this point. And now we see that there has been a shift in terms of that. Russia, on the other hand, is trying perhaps in the likes of your friend Vladimir Putin to reclaim the old Soviet empire. How would you argue that out?
You know, first and foremost, we must know and appreciate the fact that the West have been setting rules, but they don't move according to those rules.
Okay.
Right? When Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s,
yes,
there was an agreement, you know, that NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, would not go beyond a certain level, right? But time comes when NATO begins crossing the boundaries, the battle line.
Yes.
Right? And of course the essence of the West inviting Ukraine into NATO and EU is actually to weaken. Remember that Ukraine was one of the most powerful small territories of Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
After the collapse of Soviet Union, Russia now stands out to be the hegemonic empire or the custodian of the post-Soviet states.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And when the Soviet Union was disintegrated, there were agreements, as you've said,
yes,
that were agreed upon,
yes,
between the West and the post-Soviet states.
Yes.
But now, slowly but surely, as you have seen right from the times of Clinton, the times of Bush, every regime in the US has been making advancement, abusing the rules they set as well as that.
Yes.
And of course, they abuse. Every time they abuse, they first and foremost border on the sovereignty of Russia.
Yes.
Russia, as an emerging state that was humiliated during the Cold War, has also been struggling to reclaim. You know, concept of sovereignty are issues of power, power centers.
Yes.
You know, that's why you find that now Russia and China, these were countries that were also, for example, you know, China belongs to the third civilization, global civilization. You know, it has been a powerful entity in its own right, preserving its own culture, values, and all that. You know, it has been growing independently. But every time the US, you know, as a champion of the West, has been trying to stumble on the progress and development of China, of Russia. That's why you find that now these alliances which are forming up are actually inevitable. They're inevitable in the sense that I normally give this narrative that when you see a guest who broke the teapot of the host can never forget that guest.
Yes.
You know, if I come in your home, you invite me, and I break the teapot, the only teapot you have, you can never forgive me, neither can you forget me. So every time America has been expanding its tentacles, its influence, you know, is weakening Russia, is weakening China, is weakening Belarus.
Yes.
You know, and these people are struggling. You know, remember even at one time, Russia wanted to enter into European Union, and the US blocked it.
Absolutely.
Right? But again, they want to invite Ukraine. Yet Ukraine has been the bastion of all the minerals within which nuclear weapons have been made. So you could really see that there is some justification.
Okay. So in your argument, it's a question of now a change of the world order.
You've said it.
So we see a new narrative propounding itself, the ideology that people are now trying to self-assert. Do you see a conflict that is likely to arise? Because if, for example, we argue that now America wants to stay as the only superpower, there are those who argue that perhaps the only superpower we have, according to the World Bank, is America, and those according to IMF is China, on the other hand. So what is the game plan? We are seeing Russia rising, we are seeing America rising, we are seeing China rising. Perhaps those are the bigger ones, because even in terms of what we call hyper-supersonic missiles now, those are the countries, maybe those that have those. There's North Korea, by the way. So if you are arguing that this is a war that is likely to culminate into a third world war sorts, who are the two most important entities that the world should watch out for?
First and foremost, I don't want to agree with you that the West or the US is rising. Actually, the US has reached the crescendo of its curve. It's now declining. That's why I'm saying that. That's why we argue in that book that US and the West are in a state of free fall. Right?
Yes.
Once you reach the apex, you know, the next thing is to decline into what we call the law of diminishing marginal utility. You must begin declining.
Okay.
Now we are seeing rising China, rising Russia, you know, Belarus, you know, call them the BRICS.
Yes.
You know, Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa. These are the rising.
Okay. How about the Asian tigers on the other hand?
Of course, the Asian tigers have now been swallowed up by this new dispensation of the BRICS. You know, if I can take you back, you know, the other time when America was attacking Libya, when America was attacking Iraq, when America was attacking Iran, America would have one voice, and that voice would be echoed through the United Nations organization.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Now, United Nations General Assembly calls all states in the world to make a resolution against Russia and China. Majorly Russia. What is surprising is that very many countries decide to become non-aligned. They make no mention. Even those who have made a mention condemning China, Russia, like India, are now again moving towards, like Erdogan of Turkey is now moving towards Russia. So that's why I'm saying that China, US is in a state of decline.
Okay.
Remember that all those who are non-aligned are actually aligned to Russia. You know, so you will see that the West or USA has lost the moral authority.
Okay, so you're now losing the moral authority. That America is no longer a superpower or the independent or the only superpower, as it were. Dr. Balunywa, tell me something. How does the war in Ukraine play on innocent Africa, like you call it in your book?
First and foremost, we have argued in our book with the stand on that Africa is undergoing what we call the second scramble. You know, the first partition of Africa was in 1885 during the International Berlin Conference. Now, today, we are seeing the second scramble and partition of Africa. Russia is in Africa.
Yes.
China is in Africa.
Yes.
They have all brought their investments in Africa. US is in Africa. France is in Africa. Belgium is in Africa. They are all fighting to maintain the status quo. Africa is now divided. Remember when the United Nations General Assembly invited Africa, you know, to make a resolution against China. Many countries, including your own country,
Uganda,
was reluctant to condemn China, to condemn Russia. You get the point? What does that mean? Today, we are seeing the West being led by America, criticizing the investments of Russia and China in Africa.
Okay.
Russia and China in Africa are interested in Africa's resources. US is also interested in African resources.
Okay.
I want you to know that from the time of Mobutu Sese Seko, right, to date, to 2016, America has invested and championed and fueled wars on the African continent. You know, why? Because America's recent investment is in ammunitions, amare, the nuclear weapons, the anti-ballistic and ballistic missiles that you see that African dictators use. You know, just a minute, Isaac.
Yes.
You know, there is something so interesting that you must understand about the West. The West is talking about democracy, promoting democracy. Democracy as a concept, you know, is a Western value, right? Africa had its own democracy. You know, it's a Western value. Democracy only works for the West when the West is with you. You know, and when the West is not with you, democracy is promoted. Then the other thing that the West is promoting on the African continent is human rights. You know, they talk about human rights. Recently, I heard that Uganda has withdrawn from renewing the contract of this human rights organization. You know, and you know, there's something so interesting, if not sickening, that today the Americans have also redefined human rights to the extent that to them, human rights transcends beyond sex to same sex. You know, that's why you see that even the concept of homosexuality is rising in Africa. True, Biden came out recently and condemned, you know, homosexuality. But you and I know very well that what America does in the night is different from what it does during the day. During the night, it was condemning Mobutu. During the day, it was supporting Mobutu. During the night, it was condemning Kabila. During in the day, it was supporting Kabila. During in the night, it was promoting Gaddafi. During the day, it was condemning Gaddafi. So, today, we are experiencing what we call the second scramble and the partition of African resources. You know?
Interestingly, I got recently to learn that even Africa now is being given the opportunity to sit as a permanent member of the Security Council. Interesting, Africa. I was amazed that that was proposed by America. They're saying they're inviting Africa to have a permanent seat on the Security Council. And I'm asking myself, what is the deal here? Perhaps now they see yes.
You know, when you talk about permanent seat on the UN Security Council, like I've told you, we're talking about power. You know, power is not given; it is struggled for.
Yeah.
You know, it was this guy called Franz Fanon in his book The Origin of the Earth. He says that independence or power is not a gift given upon demand. It is a struggle for those. It is a reward for those who struggle for it. So for you to call Africa to become a member of the permanent a permanent member on the UN Security Council, that is a hoax.
I know.
It's to hoodwink Africa to think that Africa has now come of value. If Africa, 99% of its ammunitions are still made in the USA, are still made in Russia, are still made in Belarus, are still made in, then how do you call a country that cannot even manufacture a nuclear weapon to make it appear that it is also a permanent member of the Security Council? What decision is it going to make?
Talk about the loans they give, the IMF loans, the World Bank loans, and stuff like that. Okay, now let's make a digression a little bit. Tell me how this issue affects the issue in DRC Congo today. Because you also talk about that in your book with Professor
Yeah, that is true. You know, I've had many people, especially those who belong to the School of International Relations, looking at the DRC war in reflection to M23, the Mai Mai, and many other forces, ADF there. Many people are looking at it as a very small thing. But one scholar has argued that the DRC crisis or conflict is the beginning of Africa's World War. You know, that is one school of thought. But to Yash Tanon and Mahir, we argue that the crisis in Congo is still a creation of the West versus the East in the interest of natural resources. So we find that we have over 21 countries, African countries, who are involved. And every country that is involved in that war is claiming legitimacy. For example, when Rwanda was coming into DRC, it was saying it was looking for the Interahamwe. These people who participated in the genocide of 1994. And they are saying that these people ran from this way, we are hunting them. When Uganda wanted to enter into DRC, they said, oh, ADF is the headquarters. So we have to go there in North Kivu. When Sudan wanted to enter, it said the same thing. They are all claiming, they have all, I don't want to believe in this concept of rebel movements fighting legitimate Soviet states, that they are all in Central African Republic in the names of DRC. You know? So you find 21 African countries. But all these 21 African countries, they are pledged to their colonial masters.
Okay, there we go.
You know? When you smuggle gold, diamond, and cotton, you know, these minerals are shipped from Congo, right?
Right.
Into Uganda, into Kigali, into Kampala, into most of these capitals.
Yes.
But finally, they are exported to the West.
Absolutely.
Because it is the West with these kind of industries where these minerals are required.
Absolutely.
For nuclear what? Atomic bombs.
Absolutely.
So we know that very well. We also know. We also appreciate the fact that there are countries that have been depending on Russia and Ukraine food. That's why we have what we call a food security question.
Yes.
You know, in Africa.
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
Because of the war and the economic sanctions.
Yes.
You know, on Russia has now hampered the free flow of grain, the free flow of millet, the free flow of all sorts of grains and minerals and fertilizers. So this has affected the food security question in Africa.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So when America imposes sanctions on Russia, it is not only affecting, right? It is not only affecting Russia, it is affecting innocent Africa.
You know, it's amazing to note that even the first uranium that actually made the atomic bombs that went and hit Nagasaki and Hiroshima, I'm told came from Africa. You know, so I realize the importance of Africa. Is it perhaps better said that Africa is the next superpower?
No,
without knowing so.
No, that's not true. Actually, for you to be in position to understand, but Africa has been a victim of economic rape, political rape, environmental rape, military rape. Call it. All sorts of rapes have been made on Africa. Africa can no longer deliver. That's why I told you that in 1884 to 1885, Africa experienced what came to be called the European scramble of Africa. What were they scrambling for? They were scrambling for all these kind of minerals to go and set up industries, which they have now. You know, even the slave trade, which you keep on blaming on the Arabs. The end result of this slave trade, the Arabs were shifting, getting these slaves from Uganda, from Nigeria, and all parts of the country to work on the plantation industries in Europe. Now today, we're experiencing what we call the second scramble of Africa. You know, Europe, Russia, China are not fighting this time for territories. They are fighting for minerals. They have set up proxy wars. You know? Proxy wars in Somalia, proxy wars in DRC, proxy wars in Libya, proxy wars, you know?
Could that be also an explanation why certain entities end up remaining in power for a long time?
No doubt about that. You know this concept of a third term emerges from Africa as a contestation of Western values in the names of democracy. You know, and the African, you know, by nature, as I've told you, that Western democracy is not African democracy. You know, and every time the Americans or the West have exploited you, they know that they can only use you for 2 terms. After using you for 2 terms, they tell you now leave, so that you can have a new entrant whom they are going to whom they are again going to exploit. You know, this is the concept behind Western democracy. The now new concept behind human rights, as advocated for by the West, is actually promoting homosexuality.
And you know, it's interesting because you see, when we argue in terms of so-called fundamental human rights, the question is, what is a fundamental human right? Should that be subjective to perhaps a culture or a society where people come from? Because perhaps that's the reason why we Africans have actually been dominated over, because our ideals and norms were suffocated and subjugated, and now we're being grafted on entities or ideologies that do not actually come from our own. So that is an argument that Dr. Mahiri Balunywa proposes in his book together with Professor Yash Tandon. For the record, Dr. Where and what is the right title of that book, and where can your listeners find that book?
The book is in its final production print. You'll find it online in the next 2 or 3 months or so. Of course, I have some copies, promotional copies. After the final editing, it will be out on the bookstores. And it's titled "Pushing and Pulling the Frontiers of the Third World War: The Other Side of the Coin."
There you go.
And of course, we hold in that book. We fundamentally hold the U.S. and the West responsible for the Third World War, just as it was responsible for the Second World War.
There you go, listeners. We are so privileged to have hosted our friend, the only and only one, Dr. Mahili Balunywa, trying to shed some light into the war in Ukraine. We will have a more discourse and perhaps more interaction on the same at the next time. Thank you for your attention and God bless you.